Passengers covered their noses as a flight attendant slammed a meal tray onto a man's table. The food was rotten, mold covered the chicken, the smell was unbearable. She smiled and said, "Eat quickly." The man didn't argue. He didn't complain. He simply looked at the tray and reached into his pocket. What the flight attendant didn't know was that this quiet passenger was not powerless. And within minutes, phones were recording, whispers spread across the cabin, and the entire airline realized something had gone terribly wrong. Before the plane could land, careers would be destroyed, federal laws would be triggered, and one act of humiliation would turn into a nightmare no one on that flight would ever forget. This is the story of choosing the wrong passenger. "Here's your gourmet meal, sir." Flight attendant Bethy's voice dripped with mock sweetness as she slammed the tray down. The smell hit first, sharp, putrid. Then the sight, chicken breasts speckled with fuzzy green mold, sauce curdled into chunky yellow clumps. Jamal Washington stared at the obviously spoiled food. Around him, passengers craned their necks. Some covered their noses. Bethy's voice carried across 3 rows. "People like you should be grateful for any food at all." The cabin fell silent, except for the drone of engines. 37,000 feet above Kansas, surrounded by witnesses, Jamal reached for his phone. His fingers found something else first. The corner of a platinum card tucked in his shirt pocket. He began recording. "Have you ever been served something so degrading that it questioned your very humanity?" Jamal kept his voice steady. "Ma'am, this food is clearly spoiled." Bethany crossed her arms. "That's the last meal in economy. Eat it or starve." Or the mold wasn't even hidden. Green patches dotted the chicken like toxic confetti. The vegetables had turned to brown mush. Even the dinner roll felt squishy under the plastic wrap. "I can smell it from here," whispered the woman in 14B. Bethy's eyes flashed. She disappeared into the galley and returned with another tray. "Maybe this one's more to your taste." Same moldy chicken, same curdled sauce. She set it down with theatrical flair. 10 minutes until landing. The countdown had begun. In seat 12A, 17-year-old Sierra Martinez pulled out her phone. She'd been documenting her summer volunteer trip to build houses in Memphis. Now she had something else to record. "Y'all seeing this?" she whispered to her camera. "Tox foods served to black passengers." She angled the lens toward Jamal's tray. The mold glistened under the cabin lights. Her TikTok went live instantly. 20 viewers became 50. Jamal photographed the food from multiple angles. He checked the meal service stickers, lot number 4751B, packed yesterday at 6:47 a.m. The expiration stamp was smudged but readable. Expired 3 days ago. He pulled out a small silver device from his pocket. It looked like a digital thermometer. The tip touched the chicken breast. The screen flashed red. 47.2 degree, dangerously above safe temperature. "Interesting," he murmured, making notes in a leather journal. Other passengers started checking their meals. The elderly black man in 15C found similar green spots. The Latina mother in 16A showed her daughter spoiled vegetables to the flight attendant. "Ma'am, my child's food is rotten too." Bethany barely glanced over. "That's what we have today." But the white businessman in 14A, his chicken looked golden brown, properly heated. The family in row 11, their meals were fresh, steam rising from properly warmed containers. Sierra caught it all on camera. Her viewer count hit 200. "This is messed up," commented a Justice Warrior 23. "Call the health department." "That's food poisoning waiting to happen," typed at Mom of 3 ATL. The comments multiplied faster than Sierra could read them. Bethany called for backup. "Janet, we have a difficult passenger in 13D. Supervisor Janet Mills appeared within seconds. Mid-4S, gray hair pulled into a tight bun, authority radiating from her pressed uniform. She surveyed the scene, spoiled food, recording phones, restless passengers. "Sir, our catering meets all federal standards," she announced, loud enough for nearby rows to hear. The lie hung in the air like the smell of rotting meat. Janet attempted to cover the mold spots with extra napkins. The green fuzz peeked through white paper like a toxic bouquet. "This is all we have for your ticket class," she said, bringing a third tray from the galley. "Same contaminated food, same dismissive attitude." Jamal continued his documentation. Temperature readings, lot numbers, timestamps. His handwriting was precise, methodical. He noted the pattern of meal distribution, the deliberate selection of spoiled portions for passengers of color. "If you're so picky about food, maybe you should pack your own lunch next time," Janet suggested. Her voice carried that particular tone, the one that made it clear she thought she was dealing with someone beneath her station. Sierra's live stream reached 500 viewers. The hashtag #SpoiledFoodRacism started gaining traction. 9 minutes to landing, the captain announced over the intercom. Jamal pulled out his phone and speed-dialed a number. It went straight to voicemail. He tried another, same result, the third number connected. Health Department emergency line. A voice answered. "This is concerning contaminated food service on American Airlines Flight 2847, Jamal said quietly. "Multiple passengers served spoiled meals with visible mold contamination." Bethany tried to snatch the phone. "Sir, you can't make calls during landing preparation." "The call is documented," Jamal replied calmly, ending the conversation. "Food safety violations require immediate reporting." Janet's confidence wavered for the first time. "Sir, there's no need to involve outside agencies. This is just a misunderstanding." "Ma'am, serving spoiled food violates federal health codes. I need to document this properly." The cabin buzzed with whispered conversations. Passengers compared their meals. The pattern became undeniable. Fresh food for white passengers, contaminated food for everyone else. Sierra's viewer count hit 800. Comments flooded in faster than she could moderate them. "This is discrimination. Sue them." "Where's the FBI when you need them?" "That airline is about to get canceled." 8 minutes to landing. Jamal opened his leather journal wider. Inside, nestled between pages of handwritten notes, was a laminated card. Sierra's camera caught a glimpse, official-looking, with a government seal. But before anyone could read the details, turbulence hit. Phones went down, attention shifted to seat belts and landing preparations. Janet collected the contaminated trays hastily. "Let me dispose of this for you." "No," Jamal said firmly. "These need to be preserved for health inspection." His tone carried something new. Not anger, not pleading, authority. Janet paused. Tray halfway to the galley. Something in his voice made her hesitate. 7 minutes to descend," came the captain's voice. In the galley, Bethany whispered urgently to another flight attendant. "This guy's making a federal case out of spoiled chicken." She had no idea how right she was. Sierra kept recording her phone battery at 23%. The story was just beginning, and 1,200 people were now watching the drama unfold at 37,000 FTE. The contaminated food sat between them like evidence at a crime scene, which, as it turned out, it was 6 minutes to landing. Sierra's live stream exploded. 1,200 viewers became 2,000. Comments cascaded down her screen like digital rain. "That's food poisoning waiting to happen. Call the CDC. This is straight-up biological warfare." The hashtag #SpoiledFoodRacism was trending. Each share multiplied the audience. Real-life stories of discrimination were pouring into the comments section. Other passengers started examining their own meals with new scrutiny. Mrs. Carter in row 15 discovered black spots on her chicken. The college student in 16C found his vegetables swimming in what looked like pond water. All passengers of color, all served contaminated food. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom. Flight attendants, we've received reports of a passenger refusing to follow crew instructions regarding meal service. Jamal hadn't raised his voice once, hadn't moved from his seat. His only crime was documenting what they'd served him. 5 minutes to landing. Air Marshal David Torres appeared from first class. 6'2", crew cut, the kind of presence that commanded immediate attention. He'd been monitoring the situation through the cabin camera feeds. Even he recoiled when he saw the contaminated food. "Sir, these ladies say you're being disruptive," Torres said, but his tone lacked conviction. The evidence was literally rotting in front of him. "Officer, I'm simply documenting a food safety violation and discriminatory service," Jamal replied. His voice remained calm, professional. "Would you eat this food?" Torres examined the moldy chicken. The smell made him step back. "No, sir, I would not." Janet's face flushed red. "Air Marshal, this passenger is disrupting our meal service and making unfounded accusations." "Ma'am, with respect, these accusations appear to have merit." Torres gestured at the obvious contamination. "This food is clearly unsafe." Bethany panicked. She grabbed the tray from Jamal's seat. "Let me dispose of this immediately." "Stop!" "Oh." Jamal's command carried unexpected authority. "That's evidence of a federal health violation. Moving it constitutes tampering." Something in his tone made everyone freeze. Bethy's hands hovered over the tray like she'd been caught stealing. 4 minutes to landing. Sierra's viewer count hit 3,500. The live stream was being shared across multiple platforms. Food safety discrimination joined the trending topics. Comments flooded in from airline employees. "I work for Delta. This is not normal procedure." "Former flight attendant here. That food should have been thrown out days ago." "Health inspector watching. This is criminal negligence." Other passengers began recording with their own phones. The elderly man in 15C filmed his spoiled vegetables. The mother in 16A documented her daughter's contaminated meal. What started as one man's complaint had become a cabin-wide investigation. "Janet, radio ground control. We need security to meet the aircraft. Passenger in 13D is refusing to comply with crew directives." But Torres was studying the pattern of meal distribution. Fresh food in rows 11 to 12, all white passengers. Contaminated food in rows 13 to 16, all passengers of color. The discrimination was systematic, documented, undeniable. "Ma'am," Torres said to Janet, "I think you need to explain this meal service pattern to ground authorities." Janet studied her reflection in the meal. Ground Supervisor Marcus Thompson's voice crackled through Janet's radio. "Flight 2847 will have airport police waiting. Prepare an incident report for an uncooperative passenger." The machinery of institutional power was mobilizing against one quiet man with spoiled food and a camera phone. 3 minutes to landing. Jamal continued taking notes. His handwriting remained steady despite the turbulence, both atmospheric and social. He recorded employee badge numbers, timestamps, and witnessed seat assignments. His documentation was methodical, thorough, professional. Sierra's live stream reached 5,000 viewers. Comments were flooding in from across the country. "This is why I avoid flying discrimination at 30,000 FT. Call a lawyer now, that airline is finished." The story was going global in real time. Bethany attempted damage control. She announced over the PA system, "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for any inconvenience regarding meal service. Please remain seated while we address a minor catering issue." Minor catering issue. That's what she called serving moldy food to black passengers. Passengers weren't buying it. The businessman in 14A stood up to look at the contaminated meals. "Jesus Christ, that food is completely rotten." The mother in 11B covered her child's eyes. "Honey, don't look at that." Even first-class passengers were craning their necks to see what was happening in economy. 2 minutes to landing. Jamal pulled out his temperature scanner again. He tested meals from multiple rows, documenting the readings in his journal. Row 11, white family, 165 to give, safe temperature. Row 12, white couple, 162 div, safe temperature. Row 13, Jamal, 47D, div, danger zone. Row 14, Mrs. Carter, 51 diff, danger zone. Row 15, elderly black man, 49 to go, danger zone row. 16, Latina family, 46 to give, danger zone. The pattern was damning. Safe, properly heated food for white passengers, contaminated, improperly stored food for everyone else. Air Marshal Torres watched Jamal work. "Sir, you seem very familiar with food safety protocols." "Officer, any responsible citizen should know basic food safety," Jamal replied. But there was something in his tone, a precision that suggested more than casual knowledge. Torres noticed the temperature scanner, professional grade, not something a typical passenger carried. Janet tried one last power play. "Sir, I'm ordering you to stop disrupting this flight. Comply immediately or face federal charges." Jamal looked up from his notes. "Ma'am, exactly which federal regulation am I violating by documenting unsafe food service?" The question hung in the cabin air like a legal challenge. Janet had no answer, because there wasn't one. 1 minute to final approach. Sierra's battery dropped to 8%, but she kept recording. 7,200 people were now watching the live stream. The story had been shared over 15,000 times across social platforms. Local news stations were picking up the hashtags, congressional staffers were taking notes, the NAACP was preparing statements, all from one tray of spoiled food and a man who refused to accept institutional humiliation. The plane began its descent into Kansas City International Airport. Below them, ground crews were preparing for what they thought was a routine, unruly passenger incident. They had no idea they were about to witness the intersection of food safety law, civil rights enforcement, and social media justice. Jamal closed his journal and carefully placed it in his carry-on bag. Next to it, Sierra's camera briefly captured something else, a laminated identification card with an official government seal. The letters F.A. were partially visible before the bag zipped shut, but in the chaos of landing preparations, no one except Sierra's 7,200 viewers caught that crucial detail. The plane touched down with a gentle bump. Engines reversed. Passengers prepared to disembark into what they expected would be a normal Tuesday afternoon. Instead, they were about to witness how one man's quiet dignity could bring down an entire system of discrimination. The spoiled food sat on Jamal's tray table like evidence at a crime scene, which, as federal investigators would soon determine, it was. The plane rolled to gate B-17. Airport police vehicles flanked the jet bridge, red and blue lights cutting through the terminal's fluorescent glare. Ground Supervisor Marcus Thompson waited with 2 officers, clipboard in hand, ready to document another unruly passenger incident. Just another Tuesday afternoon at Kansas City International. They had no idea what was coming. Passengers remained seated while the crew prepared for what they assumed would be a routine arrest. Sierra kept her live stream running despite her phone's dying battery. 8,900 viewers held their breath. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated while we address a passenger situation," Captain Rodriguez announced. Jamal sat quietly in 13D, hands folded, the contaminated meal still on his tray table. His calm was unnerving. Most passengers, facing arrest, showed some anxiety. Jamal looked like he was waiting for a scheduled appointment. Air Marshal Torres approached. "Sir, I need to ask you to come with us voluntarily." "Of course, officer." Jamal stood slowly, reaching for his carry-on bag. His movements were deliberate, unhurried. That's when he pulled out his phone. Not to call a lawyer, not to contact my family. He speed-dialed a number that connected immediately. "FAA Emergency Food Safety Hotline, this is Director Patricia Williams." The cabin fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Even the engine noise seemed to fade. Jamal put the call on speaker. "Director Williams, This is Senior Food Safety Inspector Jamal Washington. Badge number 4751. I'm stopped. Bethy's face drained of color like blood running from a wound. Janet's clipboard clattered to the floor. Air Marshal Torres stepped back, reassessing everything he thought he knew about the situation. Inspector Washington. Director Williams' voice carried clearly through the cabin. What's your status? Then I'm documenting a Level 1 food contamination incident with evidence of discriminatory distribution, Flight AA 2867, Kansas City International Gate B17. The words hit like physical blows. Level 1 food contamination. Federal investigation. Career-ending violation. Sierra's live stream exploded. 12,000 viewers became 15,000 in seconds. Comments flooded the screen faster than anyone could read. He's a federal inspector. Plot twist of the century. Those flight attendants are done. Jamal opened his leather journal. What passengers had assumed were personal notes were revealed as official federal documentation. Temperature readings, violation codes, chain of custody protocols. Director, I have evidence of systematic food safety violations with apparent racial bias in meal distribution. Multiple passengers served contaminated food with surface mold and dangerous temperature readings. Bethany tried to speak. Nothing came out. The woman who'd been so confident serving spoiled food to a black passenger now faced the reality that she'd been discriminating against a federal inspector. Inspector Washington, do you need immediate ground support? Yes, ma'am. I'll need a full crew interview, meal preservation for laboratory testing, and service audit documentation. Torres was the first to recover. Sir, I apologize. I had no idea. Officer, you responded appropriately to the information you had. Jamal's tone remained professional. The crew reported a disruptive passenger. You investigated. That's proper protocol. But his eyes found Bethany and Janet. However, serving contaminated food to passengers based on their race violates multiple federal statutes. The power dynamic had completely reversed. Minutes ago, Bethany had the authority of her position, her uniform, the institutional backing of the airline. Now she faced a federal inspector with documentation of her violations. Ground Supervisor Thompson climbed aboard, still expecting to arrest a troublemaker. Instead, he found airport police stepping aside for FAA investigators already en route. What the hell is going on here? Thompson demanded. Jamal handed him a business card. Official government seal, Senior Food Safety Inspector, Federal Aviation Administration. Thompson's clipboard joined Janet's on the floor. Sir, we received reports of an unruly passenger. Mr. Thompson, you received reports of a passenger documenting federal safety violations. There's a significant difference. Sierra's battery hit 3%, but she kept recording. This was the story of a lifetime. 18,000 people were watching federal justice unfold in real time. Jamal continued his call with Director Williams. Ma'am, I need you to know this appears to be systematic. I've been monitoring this route for 6 months. Today's incident follows a pattern of discriminatory service I've documented across multiple flights. The revelation hit like a second tsunami. This wasn't random. This was a federal investigation that had been building for months. Inspector Washington, preserve all evidence. A full investigation team is en route. Already secured, ma'am. Contaminated meals preserved with chain of custody documentation. Multiple witness recordings. Temperature data logged with timestamps. Bethany found her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know. We didn't realize. Jamal looked at her directly. Man, my identification was irrelevant. You served spoiled food to passengers based on their skin color. Whether I was an inspector, a teacher, or unemployed, that action violated both federal law and basic human decency. The truth of it silenced her completely. She hadn't discriminated against a federal inspector. She discriminated against a black man who happened to be a federal inspector. Janet tried damage control. Inspector Washington, surely we can resolve this internally. No need for formal reports. Ma'am, federal food safety violations require mandatory reporting. There's no discretionary option. His tone was matter-of-fact, almost gentle. Serving contaminated food is a federal crime. Doing so with racial bias elevates it to civil rights violation. The legal weight was crushing. Federal food safety violations carried fines up to $500,000, 0 cents per incident. Civil rights violations added criminal liability. Career destruction was the minimum consequence. Air Marshal Torres stepped forward. "Inspector, what do you need from me?" "Officer, please ensure no one disturbs the contaminated meals. They're now federal evidence." Jamal gestured to the spoiled food still sitting on passengers' tray tables. "Also, I'll need statements from witnesses who observed the discriminatory meal distribution." "Absolutely, sir." Sierra's phone finally died, but not before capturing Jamal opening his carry-on completely. Inside, nestled between official documentation, was equipment that told the whole story. Professional-grade temperature scanners, food safety testing kits, federal inspection badges, chain of custody forms, legal citation books. This man didn't just happen to carry food safety equipment. This was his job, his expertise, his federal authority. The passengers began to understand what they'd witnessed, not just discrimination, but discrimination against someone with the power to do something about it. Mrs. Carter from row 15 stood up. "Inspector, I received spoiled food too. I'd like to make a statement." The elderly man from row 15 nodded. "Same here. Whatever you need." One by one, the passengers who'd received contaminated food volunteered as witnesses. They weren't just supporting Jamal anymore. They were supporting federal law enforcement. Thompson's radio crackled. "Ground control. FAA investigation team arriving at gate B7. Clear all non-essential personnel." The institutional machinery that had mobilized against one quiet passenger was now scrambling to accommodate a federal investigation. Airport police stepped aside, airline supervisors yielded authority. Jamal remained seated, still documenting. His handwriting hadn't wavered once during the entire ordeal. Professional training had prepared him for exactly this scenario. Inspector Torres asked quietly, "How long have you been working on this case?" "Officer, I inspect this route monthly as part of routine federal oversight. What happened today wasn't planned. It was just the most blatant violation I've documented." The systematic nature of it was staggering. 6 months of federal documentation, multiple flights, pattern analysis, professional investigation disguised as routine travel. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated while federal investigators board the aircraft." Federal investigators, not airport security, not airline management, the federal government of the United States. Bethany sat in the galley, head in her hands, career in ruins. Janet stared at the contaminated meals that had seemed like such a small act of cruelty 30 minutes ago. Now they were federal evidence in a civil rights investigation. Outside the aircraft windows, news vans were already arriving. Social media has done its work. #spoiled food racism was trending nationally. Congressional offices were getting calls. The NAACP was preparing statements, all because one flight attendant thought she could humiliate a black passenger with spoiled food. She'd picked the wrong passenger. Director Williams's voice continued through Jamal's phone. "Inspector Washington, preliminary review suggests potential pattern violations across multiple carriers. This may expand beyond American Airlines." The investigation was growing. What started as one incident of spoiled food was becoming a federal audit of airline discrimination practices. Jamal finally ended the call and looked around the cabin. Passengers stared at him with a mixture of awe and respect. This quiet man had just transformed from victim to federal authority in minutes. The spoiled food still sat on his tray table. Evidence now. Proof that institutional discrimination had consequences when it targeted someone with the knowledge and authority to fight back, but more importantly, proof that fighting back was possible. The black tales and touching stories that emerged from this moment would inspire countless others to document, to resist, to demand dignity. Federal investigators boarded the aircraft as passengers finally began to disembark. The real investigation was just beginning, and Jamal Washington, Senior Food Safety Inspector, Badge 4751, was just getting started. The FAA investigation team arrived within 20 minutes. 3 agents in Navy blazers, carrying sealed evidence containers and federal documentation. Gate B7 transformed into a crime scene. Agent Sarah Carter led the team. 20-year veteran, built her reputation on airline safety enforcement. She'd seen everything: maintenance cover-ups, pilot fatigue violations, security breaches, but systematic food contamination with racial bias. This was new territory. Inspector Washington? She nodded with professional respect. Preliminary assessment. Jamal handed her his documentation. Agent Carter. Multiple passengers served contaminated food with visible mold contamination. Internal temperatures 46 to 51 dF. Pattern suggests discriminatory distribution based on passenger race. Chen examined the evidence bags containing the spoiled meals. Even through plastic, the smell was overwhelming. Hey Jesus, how long has this been going on? 6 months of documented incidents. Today was the most blatant violation. While agents collected evidence, American Airlines executives were in full crisis mode. Regional manager David Morrison had been pulled from a board meeting. Legal counsel Patricia Rodriguez was driving from downtown Kansas City at 90 miles an hour. The airline's stock price had already dropped 2.3% on social media reports. Spoiled food. Racism was trending in 12 countries. Congressional offices were fielding constituent calls. Morrison arrived at gate B17 looking like a man facing execution. Tailored suit, silver hair, the kind of executive confidence that usually intimidated subordinates and impressed investors. Today, he looked small next to federal investigators. Agent Carter, I'm David Morrison, Regional Director. How can we resolve this situation quickly? Chen didn't look up from her evidence cataloging. Morrison, this is a federal investigation, not a customer service complaint. There's no quick resolution. Morrison spotted Jamal still seated in the aircraft, calmly answering questions from investigators. The passenger who filed the complaint. Perhaps we could offer compensation, upgrade to first class on future flights. Sir. Agent Carter's tone carried ice. That passenger is Senior Food Safety Inspector Washington. He doesn't need flight upgrades. He needs answers about why your crew served contaminated food to passengers based on their race. Morrison's legs nearly gave out. Federal inspector, 6 months of investigation. Pattern of discrimination. The legal implications crashed over him like a financial tsunami. Agent Carter. Surely Inspector Washington understands this was an isolated incident. Mr. Morrison. Inspector Washington has documented 17 similar incidents over 6 months. This appears to be systematic discrimination, not an isolated event. 17 incidents. Morrison's mental calculator started running. Federal fines, civil rights lawsuits, criminal liability, congressional investigations, lost government contracts. American Airlines held $2.80 $8 billion in federal contracts. TSA partnerships, military transport, government employee travel, all at risk if they were found guilty of systematic discrimination. Legal counsel Rodriguez arrived, breathless, law books under her arm. David, what's our exposure? Morrison pulled her aside. Systematic food safety violations. Civil rights discrimination. Federal inspector is victim. How bad? Rodriguez went pale. Federal food safety violations carry $500,000 0 cents per incident. With 17 documented cases, that's $8,500,000 0 cents minimum. Civil rights violations add criminal liability. We're looking at potential federal prosecution. And the government contracts gone. Federal contractors must maintain compliance ratings. Discrimination findings trigger automatic contract termination. $2.8 billion gone. But the financial damage was just beginning. Rodriguez's phone buzzed with updates from the airline's crisis management team. Stock down 4.8% and falling. Social media mentions up 2,400% in 2 hours. 6 news crews en route to Kansas City. Congressional staffers requesting documentation. NOS capitulating press conference. Morrison watched federal agents methodically document evidence. Each contaminated meal was photographed, tested, and cataloged. chain of custody forms, witness statements, video evidence from passenger phones. The bureaucratic machinery of federal law enforcement was thorough, methodical, and unstoppable. Agent Carter approached Morrison with a preliminary report. Mr. Morrison, initial findings support Inspector Washington's assessment. We have evidence of systematic food safety violations with apparent discriminatory distribution. Agent Carter, what would constitute an acceptable resolution from the FAA's perspective? Chen's expression was granite. Mr. Morrison, the FAA doesn't negotiate compliance. You either meet federal standards or face federal consequences, but surely there's some middle ground. Sir, your flight attendant served moldy food to passengers because of their race. She documented it with photos. Your supervisor defended the practice. Your ground crew attempted to have the victims arrested. Carter's voice rose slightly. Oh, what middle ground exists with criminal behavior? Morrison had no answer in corporate boardrooms. We need to be proactive in corporate boardrooms. Everything was negotiable. Market share, profit margins, regulatory fines, but criminal discrimination. There was no middle ground between legal and illegal. Inside the aircraft, Jamal continued his federal documentation. Each witness statement strengthened the case. Mrs. Carter described the spoiled vegetables in detail. The elderly man from row 15 provided timestamps from his own photos. The college student in 16C had been live streaming his own experience. His videos showed Bethany deliberately selecting the most contaminated meals for passengers of color while serving fresh food to white passengers. Federal evidence was mounting by the hour. Morrison's phone rang. CEO William Harris calling from Atlanta headquarters. David, what the hell is happening in Kansas City? Bill, we have a federal civil rights investigation. Food safety violations, discrimination against a federal inspector. Silence on the line. Then how much? New minimum $8,500,000, 0 cents in federal fines. Potential loss of $2 billion, $800 million, 0 cents in government contracts. Stock price falling, congressional attention. More silence. David, fix this, whatever it takes. Bill, we can't fix federal law violations. We can only comply with the investigation and implement corrective measures. Morrison ended the call and approached Agent Carter. What would the FAA require for us to demonstrate good faith compliance? Chen consulted her preliminary report. Immediate suspension of all involved personnel pending investigation. Complete audit of food safety protocols. Implementation of anti-discrimination training. Independent oversight of meal service procedures. Timeline. Immediate suspension now. Audit and training 30 days. Independent oversight ongoing until federal compliance is verified. Morrison pulled out his phone. Bethany Williams and Janet Mills, you're suspended without pay pending a federal investigation. Security will escort you from airline property. Bethany had been sitting in the galley, still in shock. The reality of federal prosecution was beginning to sink in. Career over. Criminal charges pending, financial ruin is approaching. Mr. Morrison, I didn't know he was an inspector. Ms. Williams, you served spoiled food to passengers because they were black. Inspector Washington's profession is irrelevant to that violation, Agent Carter overheard. Actually, Mr. Morrison, tampering with federal inspectors adds additional charges. Ms. Williams interfered with federal oversight, which carries separate penalties. The legal holes kept getting deeper. Each revelation added new violations, new consequences, new federal attention. Morrison's phone buzzed with a text from headquarters. Congress requesting hearings, the Transportation Committee wants full documentation, congressional hearings, public testimony, national media coverage. The nightmare was expanding beyond Kansas City. Inside the aircraft, Jamal finished his witness interviews. 17 passengers had provided statements. 5 had video evidence. 3 had their own temperature readings from personal devices. The federal case was airtight. Agent Carter approached Jamal. Inspector Washington, preliminary investigation supports a recommendation for federal prosecution. Are you prepared to testify? Agent Carter. I'll provide whatever testimony federal law requires. Morrison overheard. Federal prosecution, criminal charges, congressional testimony. The words hit like physical blows. Inspector Washington, Morrison approached carefully. On behalf of American Airlines, I want to personally apologize for the treatment you received. Jamal looked at him directly. Mr. Morrison, I appreciate the apology, but the issue isn't how I was treated. The issue is how your airline treats all passengers. The distinction was crucial. This wasn't about one federal inspector's experience. This was about systematic discrimination against any passenger deemed unworthy of basic dignity. Inspector, what would you recommend for preventing future incidents? Jamal considered the question carefully. Mr. Morrison, federal regulations already exist. Food safety standards are clearly defined. Civil rights protections are well established. The issue isn't new regulations, it's enforcement of existing law. How do we ensure enforcement? Independent oversight, regular federal inspections, meaningful consequences for violations, training that emphasizes legal compliance, not just customer service. Morrison took notes frantically. These weren't suggestions, they were requirements for avoiding federal prosecution. Agent Carter's radio crackled. Agent Carter, media requesting a statement. How do you want to handle the press? Standard federal investigation protocol. No details until investigation is complete. But social media wasn't waiting for official statements. Justice at 30 feet was trending globally. Passenger videos were being shared millions of times. Congressional representatives were calling for hearings. The story was bigger than American Airlines. Now it was about accountability, dignity, and what happened when institutional discrimination targeted someone with the power to fight back. Morrison watched federal agents seal evidence bags containing spoiled food that would likely end careers, cost millions, and change industry practices. All because his crew thought they could humiliate a black passenger with rotten chicken. They'd picked the wrong passenger on the wrong day. Federal justice was methodical, thorough, and absolutely unstoppable. 3 weeks later, the transformation was complete. Bethany Williams sat in the unemployment office, federal criminal charges pending, food tampering with discriminatory intent carried up to 3 years in federal prison. Her airline career was over. Her prospects in any customer service role were non-existent. The background check questions would follow her forever. Have you ever been convicted of federal civil rights violations? Janet Mills faced similar consequences. Supervisory personnel who enabled discrimination carried enhanced penalties under federal law. Her 20-year airline career had ended with a federal criminal record. Both women were banned from working in food service industries. Federal conviction meant no restaurant jobs, no catering work, no positions involving food safety oversight. The justice was precise, methodical, permanent. At American Airlines headquarters in Fort Worth, CEO William Harris stood before a packed press conference. Behind him, a banner read, "Dignity First, New Standards for All Passengers." Today, American Airlines announces comprehensive reforms to ensure every passenger receives safe food and respectful service, regardless of their background. The reforms weren't voluntary, they were federal requirements negotiated to avoid criminal prosecution of the airline itself. New policy implementation. Independent food safety monitors on every flight over 2 hours. Real-time temperature tracking for all meal service. Passenger-accessible reporting app for service complaints. Monthly federal inspections of catering facilities. Zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory service. Harris read from prepared remarks crafted by federal negotiators. We failed our passengers and our values. These changes ensure it never happens again. The financial cost was staggering: $12,300,000 in federal fines, $45 million for new monitoring systems, $23 million in legal settlements, lost government contracts worth $2,800 million. But the human cost was more significant. Public trust, once lost, would take years to rebuild. Dr. Patricia Williams, FAA Food Safety Director, watched the press conference from her Washington office. Inspector Washington's documentation was exceptional. 17 incidents, cross-reference data, perfect chain of custody. This case will become the gold standard for civil rights enforcement in aviation. The investigation had expanded beyond American Airlines. Delta, United, Southwest, all major carriers were implementing similar reforms proactively. Nobody wanted to be the next airline facing federal civil rights prosecution. At Kansas City International Airport, the spoiled food incident had become a case study. Airport police officers received training on distinguishing between actual disruption and passengers documenting discrimination. Air Marshal David Torres led one training session. When someone is calmly taking notes and temperature readings, they're probably not the problem. When flight attendants are serving moldy food, they definitely are. The training materials featured photos from Jamal's evidence collection. The green fuzzy chicken had become an icon of institutional discrimination. Congressional hearings followed within 6 weeks. Transportation Committee Chair Senator Elizabeth Hayes grilled airline executives on systematic discrimination practices. Mr. Harris, how does spoiled food accidentally end up only on trays served to minority passengers? Harris had no good answer. None of the airline executives did. The pattern was too clear, too documented, too damning. Representative Marcus Johnson, the only black member of the Transportation Committee, was more direct. This isn't about food safety. This is about whether airlines see black passengers as deserving basic human dignity. The hearings produced new federal legislation. The Equal Service in Aviation Act mandated independent monitoring of airline service patterns, criminal penalties for discriminatory practices, and federal oversight of industry compliance. Jamal Washington testified as the lead witness. His calm professionalism impressed even skeptical committee members. No anger, no accusations, just documented facts and professional analysis. Senator Hayes, federal food safety standards exist for good reason. When those standards are selectively enforced based on passenger demographics, it violates both health regulations and civil rights law. His testimony lasted 4 hours. Every question answered with data, documentation, and federal statute citations. The committee members realized they were dealing with someone who understood both the legal framework and practical enforcement. The real changes happened at ground level. Flight attendant training programs added 40 hours of federal compliance education. Food safety protocols became mandatory certification requirements. Discriminatory service became grounds for immediate termination in federal prosecution. Diera Martinez, the teenager whose live stream had captured everything, received a full scholarship to study civil rights law. Her documentation had provided crucial evidence for federal prosecution. "I never thought recording a video would help change federal law," she told reporters. "But when you see injustice, you have to document it." Her live stream had been viewed over 2 million times. Spoiled food racism remained a trending topic for weeks, inspiring hundreds of other passengers to report discriminatory treatment. The NALACP used the case as a model for institutional change. This proves that systematic documentation, federal law enforcement, and social media accountability can create real reform, said National President Derek Johnson. 6 months after the incident, American Airlines reported 0 food safety violations and 0 discrimination complaints on Jamal's monitored routes. The combination of federal oversight and public awareness had eliminated the problems completely. Other airlines reported similar improvements. The industry way reforms had created accountability that prevented discrimination before it occurred. Jamal continued his federal inspection work, now with enhanced authority and public recognition. His methodical approach had become the standard for federal civil rights enforcement. The spoiled food that had started everything was preserved in federal evidence storage, a reminder that one moment of documented discrimination could change an entire industry. Justice had been served, federal, comprehensive, and permanent. 1 year later, Jamal Washington received the Federal Employee Excellence Award for his service to civil rights enforcement. The ceremony took place at FAA headquarters in Washington, D.C., attended by Transportation Secretary Pete Budd and civil rights leaders from across the country. Inspector Washington's courage transformed how America ensures dignity in air travel. Secretary Buttigieg announced his documentation, didn't just expose discrimination, it eliminated it. The statistics were remarkable. Airline discrimination complaints had dropped 78% industry-wide. Food safety violations were down 91%. Federal compliance ratings had reached all-time highs. Real-life stories of change flooded social media. Passengers shared experiences of respectful service, safe food, and equal treatment. The hashtag #DignigNigNigNigNig personifies dignity. Dignity first became a celebration of progress rather than documentation of injustice. Bethany Williams completed her federal sentence and community service. She now worked at a local food bank serving meals to homeless families. Court-mandated sensitivity training had opened her eyes to the humanity she'd ignored. "I served spoiled food to people because of their skin color," she told new volunteers. "I thought I was better than them. I was wrong about everything." Her transformation was genuine, but incomplete. Federal conviction meant permanent employment restrictions. Some consequences couldn't be undone. Janet Mills returned to school, earning certification in diversity and inclusion training. She spoke at airline industry conferences about the cost of institutional bias. "Discrimination isn't just morally wrong," she told airline executives. "It's federally prosecuted, financially devastating, and personally destructive." Sierra Martinez graduated high school with honors and started college on her civil rights scholarship. Her documentary about the incident won 3 Student Film Awards. She planned to study federal law enforcement. "One live stream changed everything," she reflected. "Social media can expose injustice, but it takes people like Inspector Washington to create lasting change." The touching stories that emerged weren't just about one flight. They were about systematic transformation. Airline employees reported feeling empowered to provide equal service. Passengers described traveling without fear of discrimination. Black tales of dignity restored replaced stories of humiliation endured. The federal legislation, inspired by Jamal's case, became a model for other industries. Hotels, restaurants, and retail businesses adopted similar monitoring systems. Discrimination became too expensive and too visible to sustain. Jamal continued his inspection work with quiet satisfaction. Every month brought new compliance reports, improved safety standards, and respectful service. The systematic change he documented had become systematic reform. "Justice isn't about punishment," he told audiences at civil rights conferences. "Justice is about creating systems where discrimination can't survive." His calm professionalism had achieved more than decades of protests. Knowledge, documentation, and federal law enforcement had proven more powerful than anger or demands. The spoiled food that started everything was finally disposed of after serving as evidence in 17 related cases. Its legacy lived on in reformed policies, federal legislation, and an industry change was possible. Documentation mattered. Dignity was enforceable. One man's refusal to accept institutional humiliation had created institutional accountability. Have you witnessed discrimination that went unchallenged in your workplace or community? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience matters. Your voice creates change. Subscribe to Blacktail Stories for more real accounts of courage, dignity, and justice. Hit that notification bell so you never miss stories that prove ordinary people can create extraordinary change. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that standing up for yourself calmly, professionally, and persistently can transform entire systems, because everyone deserves safe food. If this story made you pause, think, or feel something, then it was worth telling. Stories like this remind us that dignity, courage, and calm strength can change everything. President-elect, if you believe real stories deserve to be heard, subscribe to A One Storyteller, where every story has meaning and every voice matters. Like the video, share it with someone who needs this reminder, and tell us in the comments, what would you have done in his place? Until the next story, stay aware, stay strong, and keep listening to A One Storyteller.